Ever get that feeling like you're suddenly in the deep end with something new that you need to just get? I mean, like really grasp it quickly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Whether you're prepping for a huge meeting or trying to figure out a whole new field, or even just, when your curiosity is piqued and you've got to learn more.
Exactly. You want to understand the core ideas. Like, why does it matter? And that's what we're all about here. We dive deep into a topic so you don't have to.
And today we're tackling Universal Design for Learning, or UDL for
You
short.
do DL, okay.
We've got this really interesting guide from inclusive.tiki.org.nz,
Got it.
and it's full of really insightful strategies for educators to reach all the different kinds of learners that they have in their classrooms.
So think of this deep dive as like a fast track through all that information. We've already gone through it. We pulled out the key ideas, and we're breaking it down for you.
Exactly. No need to wade through all the jargon.
Our mission here is to give you a clear understanding of UDL. We'll cover the background, the ideas behind it, and how it actually works in practice.
Because that's what really matters,
Yeah.
right? How do we use this?
Right. And we'll also be looking at how UDL connects to the bigger picture of learner-focused inclusive education, especially here in New Zealand with the NZC.
The New Zealand curriculum, yeah. So let's jump right into the heart of UDL. It all starts with these three core principles.
3 principles, all right.
And what's so cool about this is that they're not just based on some abstract theories of education, they're actually rooted in neuroscience, in how our brains learn.
Oh, wow. Brain function. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that connection.
Well, the guide explains how each of these three principles kind of maps onto different networks in our brain. It's all about how we learn. The first principle is multiple means of representation.
Okay. Multiple means of representation.
And this is all about tapping into what we call the recognition network. It's how we take in information, how we perceive it, and how we make sense of it, the what of learning.
So it's about how the information is presented to you in the first place.
Exactly. The guide really emphasizes that everybody perceives and processes information differently, and the key is that we need to offer that information in different formats.
So true.
For example, they talk about options for perception, and digital text is a great example of that.
Okay, so digital text.
It's not just like a nice to have anymore. It's so crucial because you can adjust font size, you can adjust spacing.
Customize it.
Exactly. It makes it accessible to so many more people with different visual processing needs. And then they talk about things like closed captions or having audio descriptions.
Right. Accessibility features.
And again, this is acknowledging that not everyone processes auditory or visual information in the same way.
I mean, that's just logical.
Yeah.
If you think about it. It's like creating multiple entrances to the same building. Everyone can get in just through different doors.
I like that analogy. And it's about making sure everyone can access the information. So what else falls under this umbrella of representation?
Yeah, what other options are we talking about here?
Well, another really important piece is options for language, mathematical expressions, and symbols.
Okay, that sounds pretty broad.
It is, and it goes way beyond just translating things. It's about making sure things are clear. So, providing definitions for any technical terms or jargon, explaining those, or even presenting a concept through different media, like, say, a diagram alongside text.
Visual aids, I get it.
Yeah. The guide emphasizes how important this is for learners who are new to a language or who process symbols differently. It's about making sure that the meaning is clear no matter what.
Breaking down those barriers.
Exactly. And then the third part of representation is all about options for comprehension. So we've presented the information, but now how do we help people actually understand it?
Right, make it stick.
The guide suggests activating prior knowledge before you introduce a new concept.
Like a warm-up.
Yes, get those brains ready to go. And highlighting those key patterns and big ideas, helps learners see the forest for the trees.
I love that. Seeing the forest for the trees.
And then providing different ways for people to process and internalize information, like, say, using graphic organizers or offering summaries, scaffolding to help with deeper understanding.
Okay, so that's the what of learning. Multiple means of representation, how we get the information in. What's the next principle?
So the second principle is multiple means of action and expression. And this shifts the focus to the strategic networks in the brain, how we plan things, how we execute tasks, how we actually show what we've learned. It's the how of learning.
So this is about how students actually interact with the material and how they show what they know.
Right.
Yeah.
And the guide points out that learners differ a lot in how they approach a task and how they best express their understanding. So just like with representation, offering choices is key. So they talk about options for physical action.
Okay, options for physical action.
And this could be anything from like physically manipulating objects to using digital tools. And providing those digital options is really important for minimizing those physical barriers, giving students more control.
Makes sense. Not everyone interacts in the same way. What about showing what they've learned?
That's where options for expression and communication come in. The guide suggests offering a whole bunch of ways for students to demonstrate their knowledge. It could be writing, it could be speaking, creating multimedia projects, even using the visual arts.
So many possibilities.
The point is that the method of expression shouldn't be a barrier to showing understanding. Offering both physical and digital tools with the right support and scaffolding, it lets students choose the format that works best for them.
Right. So if someone really struggles with writing, maybe they can shine in a presentation or a project.
Absolutely. And then finally, within action and expression, there's options for executive function.
Executive functions.
Yeah, and these are those higher level cognitive skills that we need for goal setting, planning, managing time, and keeping track of our own learning. The guide suggests things like explicitly guiding students in setting those achievable goals, providing tools for self-management, offering techniques for students to track their own progress. It's about empowering them to become strategic learners.
So it's giving them the tools to really take charge of their own learning journey.
Exactly. And that naturally leads us to the third principle, multiple means of engagement.
Okay, engagement.
This is where we connect with the affective network in the brain. Emotions, motivation, why we even bother to learn things.
The why. What makes us want to learn in the first place?
Yes. The guide really emphasizes that to really engage learners, we have to tap into their interests, give them choices, make the learning relevant and valuable to them. So under options for supporting interests, they suggest offering flexible choices in topics or activities. Giving students that agency can really boost their motivation.
Right. Makes sense.
Another key thing is to increase the relevance and value of the learning, connect it to their lives, their interests, and minimize anything that might cause anxiety or distraction.
Make it applicable.
Exactly. So giving students a voice in what and how they learn isn't just about being nice. It actually fuels their desire to learn.
So it's not just feel-good stuff. It's actually impactful.
Exactly. And then the guide talks about options for sustaining effort and persistence. And this involves things like setting clear and achievable goals, scaffolding those challenges so they're not too overwhelming, but not too boring either. That sweet spot.
Finding that balance.
And encouraging collaboration, creating a supportive learning environment, providing feedback that focuses on growth and mastery, not just grades, helps students see learning as a process.
Makes sense. It's easier to stay engaged when you feel like you're making progress.
Right. And the last piece of the engagement puzzle is options for self-regulation. Helping students develop the skills to manage their own emotions, set personal learning goals, reflect on their progress. They even talk about introducing the concept of the learning pit.
Learning bit.
Yeah, it's about normalizing that feeling of struggle in learning, helping students develop strategies to work through those challenges, providing tools to manage emotions, offering chances for students to think about their learning process.
So it's like teaching them how to learn.
Absolutely. Wow, so we've covered a lot. UDL really offers a thorough way of thinking about how students learn and what motivates them. But how does a teacher actually put this into practice? What does this look like in the classroom?
Right, that's the key question.
And the guide does go into practical applications of UDL at different educational levels. A key concept is what they call predictable variability.
Predictable variability.
It's the understanding that in any group of learners, you're going to have a wide range of needs and preferences. UDL says, instead of reacting to these differences after they come up, we should design learning from the start to address this variability.
So it's like, I don't know, designing a website to work on all sorts of different browsers and devices from the get-go.
Perfect analogy. It's about shifting our mindset, seeing differences not as exceptions, but as the norm.
I like that. So where does a teacher even start with UDL? It sounds like a big shift.
Well, the guide offers a few starting points. One of the most effective is simply looking at your existing lessons and activities through a UDL lens.
Okay, UDL lens. So how would that work?
Instead of asking, how do I change this for a student with this specific need, ask, how can I design this from the beginning to offer options for representation, action and expression, and engagement?
Got it. Build it in from the start.
Right. And they also emphasize the importance of creating flexible learning environments. both physical and digital.
What would that look like in practice?
Well, think diverse seating arrangements, making sure digital tools are accessible to everyone, ensuring materials can be used and interacted with in multiple ways.
Ah, so building in flexibility right from the start.
Exactly. And the guide also talks about this idea of student-led design.
Student-led. That sounds interesting.
It really is. It involves actively involving students in decisions about how they learn and how the learning space is structured. By giving students a voice, educators get such a valuable insight into their needs and preferences. And it leads to learning experiences that are not only more effective, but also more engaging and relevant.
Empowering the students.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's a natural way to support diversity and personalized learning.
So it's not just the teacher dictating everything, it's a collaboration.
Exactly. The guide also highlights the importance of flexible materials and resources, and this goes back to that first principle of representation.
Full circle.
They talk about the power of digital text, the ability to change the font size, the spacing, even using text to speech. Those features are game changers for accessibility.
So it's not just about the content itself, but how it's delivered.
Precisely. And all of this leads to the question of assessment. How do we assess learning in a way that aligns with these UDL principles?
Right, because assessment is a huge part of education. So how does UDL change that?
Well, the goal is to make sure all students have a fair chance to show what they know, regardless of their strengths and challenges. This means getting rid of any barriers that might stop them from demonstrating their understanding.
I see. So let's focus on standardized tests.
It could mean offering alternatives, like oral presentations, multimedia projects, creating a visual representation. The point is to align the assessment method with the UDL principles, offering different pathways for students to show their mastery.
So it's about making assessment itself more inclusive.
Exactly. And the guide also emphasizes the importance of self-reflection for both educators and students.
Self-reflection, okay.
For educators, it's about constantly looking at your own teaching and finding ways to be more flexible and offer more options. And for students, it's about understanding their own learning preferences and becoming more self-directed. The guide even includes perspectives from teachers who use UDL in their classrooms.
Ah, so real-world examples, always helpful. You mentioned earlier how UDL ties into bigger ideas of inclusion. Can you talk about that a bit more?
Of course, UDL is really a fundamental element of inclusive education. The guide specifically links it to the principle of inclusion in the New Zealand curriculum. It emphasizes its role in creating learning systems that are designed for everyone.
Learner-centered.
Yes, and by designing flexible learning experiences from the beginning, UDL reduces the need for accommodations and modifications for individual students later on. It's about creating an environment that's more universally accessible right from the start.
So it's about designing a system that works for everyone, instead of trying to shoehorn everyone into a system that wasn't designed with them in mind.
Precisely. The guide also touches on the idea of inclusive design in physical learning spaces, considering how the layout and resources can support diverse needs. And ultimately, if we implement UDL widely, it can create more inclusive systems and processes throughout a school, where everyone's needs are acknowledged and addressed in the design of learning itself.
So UDL isn't just about individual lessons, it's about creating a whole culture of inclusion.
Absolutely. So, to recap, Universal Design for Learning offers a really powerful framework.
A framework built on those three core principles.
Yeah.
Multiple means of representation, how we get the information in, multiple means of action and expression, how we interact with it and show what we know, and multiple means of engagement, that why, that drives learning.
And it's all about building in flexibility and inclusivity from the very start. By understanding and applying these principles, educators can proactively break down barriers to learning and create more equitable opportunities for all their students to thrive.
It really is about shifting our mindset, moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach and embracing the diversity of learners in all its forms.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been a really insightful deep dive, and it makes you think, these principles were developed for education, but could they apply to other areas of our lives, our work? How can we design more inclusive and accessible systems in general? Something to ponder, isn't it? Until our next deep dive.
See you then.